Can I jump in? Also, just building on what I'm hearing, I think that that question of the CEO and the activist and the dialogue that they were having and what that means in terms of, and I'm going to use the word transformation because we talked about values before. To me, that kind of sits in the heart of that constellation is transformation. We're all seeking to transform in our own personal lives. We want to transform our relationships to be better, transform our bodies to be stronger, transform the world to be happier. So transformation is a big part of the agenda. And yet you have these entrenched systems and people who work within them and represent them. And then you have those who are on the other side trying as their vocation to change these very systems. And the question is, what is the power of that handshake between the activist and the executive? Is there really promise in that? Or are we wasting our time? Are people set in their ways? Or is it best that we just kind of rage against the machine? You know what I mean? Realizing that this is a zero-sum game. One is going to win, one is going to lose. Is that the future of activism? Or is that dialogue, that genuine listening, appreciating across lines and finding a meeting point? Is that the future of it? What is your opinion, either one of you?
Perhaps
I've been leading. Go ahead.
I'll perhaps respond to that, Daniel. I think it's a great observation. I think two things for me. I think firstly, the severity and the global nature of the challenges that we all face will only be solved by partnership of different groups, of politicians, regulators, individuals, consumers, corporates. The only tech firms. The only way we're going to solve this is to work together across boundaries, and I think that is happening. I think in the corporate world and the financial institution world, I sense a real sea change in the last number of years where, yes, there'll be some firms that are greenwashing, inverted commas, but most are not. I think it's going into the heart of the way they do business, because most firms, and I certainly like to think that NatWest is leading by example here, but I think there's a spectrum, obviously, of where individual firms are on a journey, understand that without doing this, they will effectively not have a commercial future. In the, that you should be doing it for the right reasons, the inner motivation that we've talked about, and I think there's a number of great examples around that, whether that's Unilever or NatWest or other firms that genuinely believe. There'll be others, though, that will have the cold-headed, actually, you won't have a commercial future unless you do this correctly. And I truly believe that what you've seen in the last few years is a complete sea change in the way corporates and institutions are looking at ESG, environmental, social and governance issues more broadly, and are trying their hardest to work out how they embed that in their business models. That can only be a good thing. And the more if you ally that with people's motivations, inner motivations, more of those type of individuals in senior leadership positions in all corporates, you have the ability to change the system and put pressure on politicians.
I'm curious, Liberty, what direction you're going to go with Daniel's question.
I mean, I was going to say, first of all, I totally agree with Stuart in terms of that, you have to have these partnerships. You're not going to get anywhere by banging on the glass from the other side. You have to be in the room to discuss it. And I think that's really important. I think for me, it's about asking those questions that mean you can't greenwash, because it does happen with most big corporates in quite a lot of ways in some form have done an element of greenwashing. It happens in the fast fashion industry, anywhere you look, it's very easy to do because business on that scale is so difficult to change. And I think for me, it's about asking those questions that almost mean that can't happen. I mean, first, in that instance, I'd have to ask, who's doing your environmental impact assessments? I'd love to know. That's got to be an in-house job. But aside from that, I'd have just so many different questions to understand where he's coming from, because I can't possibly engage in conversation with him or the large CEO of a corporate that's doing a similar thing without understanding where he's possibly coming from. So I'd want to know, where do you see the future of, in this case, Shell in 5 and 10 years? Do you actually see you moving away entirely from fossil fuels? It's a finite resource, right? Where are you going to go after this? There's only so much room you've got. Where do you think the room for improvement is, and how on earth you've got all these people, all these different activist groups and pressure to do the right thing move in a more sustainable way. But how are you actually going to do that? There's no point in just saying, oh, we'd love to do this, it's great, blah, blah, blah. What are you actually going to do? Where are you going to start within your business? Doesn't matter how small it is. Where are you going to start to actually implement that change? And I think I'd also love to know I'd ask, do you appreciate and acknowledge how much power you have personally to impact the environment and ultimately us? Do you appreciate how much control you have over the natural world with the decision you may or may not make? And how do you think you can move forwards with that, knowing that if you really acknowledge that, how can you move forwards to better yourself and your company and ultimately the planet?